And welcome back to Maker's Corner. Today we're going to be making these simple tea light candle holders that would make an awesome homemade gift for friends and family, or even just something to spruce up your own home. So to begin this project, I'm going to be using a cheap piece of 3/4 inch pine wood that I picked up from the local hardware store. It's 3.5 inches wide, so we need to mark our 3 cut lines at 3.5 inches each to make them into perfect squares. Next, before we start cutting, we need to locate the exact center of one of our squares. We will be doing this by using a straight edge or ruler to draw a diagonal line across each of the 4 corners of one of the squares. Alright, now we can head over to our drill, or drill press if you have one, and start carefully cutting out a minimum 1.5 inch circle in the box with our center location marked. I end up drilling a 1 3/4 inch hole because I wanted the hole in mine to be slightly larger than the actual tea light candle. Once this is done, we can start cutting along our 3.5 inch lines to get our square pieces. I'm going to be using a jigsaw here, but if you have a miter saw, I would highly recommend using it, as it would be much more precise and require far less cleanup later. And now that we have our 3 squares cut, we need to clean up the edges to remove any splintering in the wood that may have occurred during the cutting process. I'm just using a 120 grit sanding block here to quickly clean up the edges. And after you're done with sanding the edges smooth, we can move on to gluing all the pieces together. Be sure to use enough wood glue to fully cover the wooden blocks. And if you have some clamps lying around, I would highly recommend using them here, as the tighter you can get the pieces sandwiched together while the glue's drying, the better your end results will be. So I unfortunately don't have any clamps, so a bucket of pennies will have to do for me today. Since I did a pretty lousy job of cutting these squares out along the lines where I should have been cutting, I ended up having to use my orbital sander to level off each of the 4 sides so they were all nice and perfectly smooth. If you used a miter saw to cut your pieces, then this really shouldn't have been an issue at all. So the second to last step in the creation of these candle holders is to give the entire body a good smooth sanding. I started off here with a 120 grit sanding block, then moved up to 180 grit, and finally finished it off with a 400 grit sanding block to give it an extra smooth finish. And now the final step here is to apply whatever finish you want. I finally decided not to stain the wood, but instead chose to just use a polyurethane to both protect the wood and also bring out the wood grain a little bit more, and to make the natural color of the pine really pop. You don't need too much here, just do a couple of light coats. I believe I ended up doing 4 coats of the polyurethane, but this is really just going to be up to your personal preference. Now, since these tea light candle holders are so simple to make, I decided to create another one to see what it would look like to have 2 gloss black squares sandwiching a piece of pine in the middle. This time I used 2 pieces of MDF as the top and bottom instead of pine for the entire body. I started off by masking off the entire middle section, as I did not want any paint to get on the nicer piece of wood in the middle. I did make a pretty terrible mistake in using Scotch tape here instead of painter's tape, but it's all that I had available at the time. So unless you feel like spending an hour or more trying to remove tape from a piece of wood, I would highly recommend using painter's tape. Next, I began the painting process by applying the first coat of black paint to the MDF. After enough time had passed, I began to do the second coat of our gloss black paint. MDF tends to soak in paint, so you need quite a bit of it to get full coverage. Unfortunately, I severely underestimated the amount of paint it would take to cover the MDF with a nice smooth coat of paint, and ended up running out, so I ended up having to take a quick trip to Walmart for some more paint. Alright, so now that I've got more paint, I began to spray the last few coats of paint necessary to get full coverage on the entire piece. Once the paint was fully dried, I removed the tape from the middle section to reveal the unpainted wood in the middle. The last step of this project is to add a little bit of wood stain to make the middle piece of the wood really pop. I ended up getting a little bit on the paint, but this is no big deal. I just took a paper towel and wiped up the stain from the painted areas, and then added a layer of polyurethane to protect the stained wood. And if you want, you can also paint the bottom of yours. As you can tell, I didn't, but that's just because I know I'm never going to see it, so I honestly just didn't care. And that just about does it for this week's video. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Maker's Corner today, and also make sure you hit the little bell icon so you're notified whenever I upload a new video. I try to release new content every Wednesday, but if you subscribe and hit the little bell icon, you'll be notified if I end up being able to upload a little more often. Anyways guys, thanks again for watching this video, so be good out there, stay safe, and I will see all of you around the corner.